Hello and welcome to today's Cash and Treasury Management File Friday Club. We are going to be focusing on the key lessons from Eurofinance Conference in Budapest last week, and my guests today are two well-known assistant treasurers, Bengt Elvinsson from Global Operations in Corning Treasury and Palle Dedenroth, assistant treasurer, Treasury Operations at Danfoss. The theme in Eurofinance was getting on the right side of disruptive innovation, which people found a little difficult to get hold of sometimes, but it covered most of the areas in Treasury, including dealing with disruption, centralization, Bitcoin, regs, outsourcing, opening accounts, and so on. Bengt, what was your key take from the conference? What was the thing that was most interesting to you?
The piece that was most interesting to me is that we're still talking about things that I think we should have done or did 15 to 20 years ago. It seems like a lot of corporations are coming in, doing centralized treasury, doing all the basic cash management, intercompany netting processes, etc. And they're doing it today. And I went to the conference really to get an update because I haven't been there for a couple of years. And I wanted to see what should I have as a vision, because I'm putting a white paper vision together. And I want to get the ideas out of that conference to say, what have I missed? And I don't think I missed anything.
That's somehow funny you say that, because that's really much my impression as well, because I was basically participating for the same reason, to see, okay, what's new? Are there anything that we haven't done that what we need to do? What we were talking about, what we were hearing about was basically the things we have done.
Yeah, but there were some new things, like Bloomberg introduced the newest technology there into treasury management systems on the Bloomberg platform, the Bitcoin and the cryptocurrencies. They're causing real issues.
So for corporations, though, how much of an issue is Bitcoin really causing for corporations? I can't see corporations kind of getting into Bitcoin. I mean, we got other issues to deal with.
Okay, so what are the issues that they dealt with? Okay, it's repeating, but what are the issues that were really dealt with at the conference that you took something away from it?
So I agree with Bloomberg. I think Bloomberg is one of the most interesting treasury management systems development during the last 10 years, as far as I'm concerned. They got a great backbone. They got a lot of modules in their backbone, rate feeds, mark-to-market valuations, and all the good stuff that a lot of the basic treasury management systems are missing, but also have the strength to drive it to become a really good, complete, comprehensive treasury management solution for corporations. And they got the financial strength to develop it over a period of time, if that's what they want to do.
That's always the issue with Bloomberg, is whether they want to focus on it. Palle, did you see it?
Yeah, what I see is, and that's also part of what Bloomberg is doing, that the new things it's not that new, but anyway, new trends is, I think that more and more will go into so-called cloud-based solutions or services you don't host yourself. You could argue whether it's new, perhaps not, but I guess the way of connecting to these solutions are getting smarter.
And also, I mean, Bloomberg has got something that a lot of treasury management systems are struggling with, which is the whole valuation for accounting. You know, how do you get the mark-to-market valuations done? What are the tools out in the market that we all rely on? We are going back to Bloomberg to do a number of mark-to-market validation against the basic treasury management systems we got installed, just to ensure that we got a check and balance. Yeah. And you know, it's all of that stuff that I think Bloomberg could bring to the table, a complete end-to-end solution.
But that's of course because they are that close to market data that it's easier for them to do, and you don't need to struggle with uploading a lot of different things. And that's of course again shows me, yes, these cloud-based solutions have some strengths that is interesting to look at moving forward. So basically, yes, if I should do some of the same things again, which we have done, I would probably look more into cloud-based solutions that we did originally. But the big question is, of course, how ready are these solutions? Are they really ready, or are they still early birds, so to speak?
My guess is that it still is early for them, but the fact that they're entering the radar screen is very interesting, certainly to me. But the other piece I think that we're missing in some of the technology today is that we got islands of different technology solutions, but they rarely integrate well. And I expected to see a lot of corporates standing up saying, we've done a fully fledged integration of technology to take the front-end dealing systems, integrated into the back office, integrated into the deal confirmation and settlement structures with SwiftNet and all that stuff.
Yeah, you can argue, regardless which solution you have taken, you will still have some integration issues. It's more questions where they are. If you have done as we have we took the SAP solution, then you are fine in the integration to accounting, but integration to the outside world is not as good. Everything is, of course, doable, but it adds costs.
You're absolutely right there. But the whole, when I look at the future vision I'm looking at the technology-based solution where you're looking at streamlined interfaces, you're looking at less manual activity, because the manual activity always causes problems.
Yeah.
It's, errors or workload cost or whatever it is. But I do think that something is holding it back, and I can't pinpoint why corporates are going so slow on these things.
It's very costly, though, isn't it? It's not simple, any of this anymore.
And I guess that's part of the answer, yes, because of course it's easy to present whatever system it can do this and that, and you can get it in red or black or yellow or whatever color you want. But it's down to the details where all the trouble starts.
But I think that's also where so there are two facets to that statement, I think. One is that Treasury is not showing enough contribution on the other side of the cost line, right? So where are the benefits? Yeah. And secondly, the other side is, and I think that's where Bloomberg could make a difference, is there are very few well-integrated solutions in the market today where you actually can go out and get a turnkey solution. You're still in the struggle of putting the piecemeal together yourself,
Yeah, it's more frames you are buying than systems that really work from day one.
But with the cloud systems, aren't you getting more integration? Because my impression is that some of the TMS providers have stopped developing new modules. They're integrating other people's modules into their overall functionality rather than trying to develop everything themselves. Isn't that a way forward?
It could be.
From my prior days, Jack, when you're buying a different application and trying to integrate it into another application, so you got bad connectivity often between the two modules or two applications when you're trying to merge them. And I often see that, certainly my perception is that the acquisitions that are happening in the market today is more to take out competition than to build better applications. I do think you're right about one thing, because I heard one bank say that they are looking at reducing their spend on trading platforms in their own name, so to speak, because there are trading platforms being developed in the market now that are generic. So you got my Treasury 360T and a few others, right? And so you can have a much better complete solution from a corporate standpoint. Instead of having 2-3 applications that are bank specific, you could get a generic trading platform, which will much better integrate because you only need to manage one interface, so to speak. And I think that's true. So from that angle, I think there are real benefits coming there. And I do think there are real benefits with the SwiftNet, etc. coming. But we haven't done SwiftNet yet, but we are looking at what is the future. So when I look at what other corporations have done, I still find that it's hard to get the specifics. And that's something that I missed in Hungary, that we couldn't get enough specifics about the technology solution.
How about you, Palle? Did you have the same problem?
We have in fact Swift connections. And the funny thing there is that we have a in-house bank, SAP in-house bank set up, and BCM via service bureau and so on. And yes, that's working seamless. But what we now experience is that the IT guys that were part of the implementation, which have been served as well doing that and also afterwards, is now starting to get other jobs. Meaning that if we are having certain things, small things to do, it suddenly starts to become more cumbersome to make these changes.
Okay, so if we go back a minute, you didn't really say what your overall take from the Budapest conference was. What was the thing that really focused you?
Basically, it's the same as Bengt said. There is really not any significant news. It's the same things that have been talked about. Yes, what I see is starting to come is these cloud-based solutions. And as I said, it might be early birds, they might not be good enough yet, but I have a strong feeling of that might be this future solution, because if you can have these companies doing more generic setups where you don't need to think about how do you connect to bank A, B, C, D, and so on, and they do all the formats. Basically, it's about sharing the resources on the IT side.
Right, and did SAP's idea of developing a financial services network come to the fore at all? Is that in your thinking?
Yes, it is. We have been we are in close contact with SAP as well, but there you have another issue, and that is if you are going with SAP, you're very stuck that everything more or less has to be SAP. So even though they have opened up, I don't see them as sufficiently open yet, at least. So the question is really whether some of these basically smaller providers would be able to give something better, something more flexible. And I think they have a chance here. And that might even be where the theme of the Budapest conference have an edge. That yes, there are some new innovators in the market that might take over some of these solutions.
Bitcoin is clearly one. The SAP's financial service network is clearly another, and SWIFT are trying to work with them and put them in a corner rather than allow them open field.
But the thing here is that they need to ensure that it's not too complex. And that's my concern in respect of the SAP solution, which we in fact have been looking quite close into. It's quite complex still. And I've had a chance to compare with another provider, a small provider, and it seems very, very much less complex compared to the FSN solution.
Yeah,
and I think that's what we're all talking about. How do we make that environment less costly? How do we make it less complex? How do we find standardized solutions?
Yeah.
And so, you get somebody that is the front end to your dealing, but in a comprehensive manner, there's a standardized interface to the next level of systems you're using. And at the back end, when you're sending confirmations or cash or whatever it is out, that even there you got standardized interfaces. So it's a plug and play rather than buy and develop.
Yeah, that's the dream. Can I just turn the subject a little bit? Carol Berndt, the RBS new head of Global Treasury Services, was talking at the beginning about the new normal. And in particular, all the major banks are decreasing their general investment. They're cutting down the number of countries. And she was saying that we're going to have new form of partnerships, rather like the airlines. How do you both see this? Because mostly partnership banking has been an anathema to you.
I guess it depends on how good they are in doing this partnering, because looking into the past, I think we have seen a lot of bank partnering and then on-partnering again and partnering with some new partners. And if that's the case, I don't see a big value for us in it. Then I would rather have the direct contact to the banks in need.
No, and I would agree there because, and I actually look at SwiftNet as a great tool to do that in the way that you are not bank dependent when you're sending your files, etc. out. If you pick a regional provider today, you kind of dependent on that bank to feed the network with what you're sending out, including the partner banks. But I absolutely see that, once SwiftNet starts to penetrate the market more and more, why would you pick a regional partner that isn't complete? I mean, nothing that I've seen from the partner bank relationships has been good or perfect, so to speak. You always find a few cracks somewhere along the line that you didn't expect.
But as the banks withdraw, and they are, there's been articles in the Financial Times and the Wall Street Journal and so on, and Chris Skinner referred to it in one of the presentations. You're going to have to go more direct to local banks, aren't you? Are you absorbing?
I think overall, Jack, there are enough big banks out in the markets in overall to compensate. So if you take a region like Europe, if your preferred partner doesn't cover certain countries, except for when you're talking about North Africa, etc. Once you hit North Africa, you're probably allocated to a few French banks, maybe. But I mean, otherwise, I think you will find coverage by one of the main banks in overall, and I don't think I think that will help when SwiftNet is rolled out. Certainly, I think it will help us in overall to be less dependent. You can pick certain countries where your preferred partner doesn't do a good enough job.
Can I turn the subject again? Regulation inevitably came up, the regulation from Basel III, Dodd-Frank and so on. Did you learn anything about what to do about managing regulation? What are the new things there? In
overall, I think certainly from our side, we spoke a little about it, but the problem was to find enough time during the conference, which I think is always an issue. But what I would have expected would have been more selling of tools to help you to do the reporting, so to speak, more actively, from suppliers at the stands. But it didn't look like the regulatory reporting was what they pushed as a selling point. I don't know about the rest of you.
No. Yeah, in fact, that's one of the areas where I was a bit surprised. Yes, there were some providers you could talk with, but there were really no solutions showing how you should cope with this. And I guess so far it's just a pain.
Oh, absolutely, it is a pain. I mean, it's very manual for us, and they're changing the formats, etc.
Yeah.
System supply seems to be developing tools in the background, but it's a bit too slow for our liking, and it is a pain. But I also saw an article the other day is that it's just a very small percentage of in Europe. The EMIR seems to be a bit of a problem for the regulators because only a small percentage of transactions match up today.
Yeah, and that has been one of our challenges as well. If we try to go into this reporting bureau and verify the data which are coming in there, it's more or less impossible. Either you can't come into the system, is blocked due to some reason, or they are not updated with the data which has been sent to them.
That's interesting you're saying that, because I spoke to one of the companies at the conference which is involved in the reporting, and they basically said that corporates are more obliging than banks are when it comes down to reporting. And Italy apparently has got some rules regarding FX transactions that they're not considered to be FX, they're considered to be loans and deposits or whatever it was. So, they wouldn't even be reportable based on what somebody said, which sounds strange.
In fact, what we are doing currently is that we have asked our banks to report whatever we deal with them. Our log is that we don't have any internal deals. So that's why we can do it this way. But basically, we need to control whether the reporting done by the banks is okay with what we think it should be. But we haven't been able to do that at all.
We reported, and fortunately we don't really do a lot. Our main transactions would be internal FX transactions rather than external for the European entities. But we are reporting, but it is painful because of the changing fact patterns.
I think the worst about that is that I more or less feel that we get spammed from this reporting bureau about a lot of things. Remember this, and now this and that is going on. It's really hard to keep yourself updated on what is really going on, and what is really important and what is not important.
Yeah, that's the problem, because Thomson Reuters have a log of the number of changes every business day, and it's up at 130 per day.
Wow.
I'm sure all of you have difficulty keeping contact. Anything else that was really interesting that I haven't...
Yeah, I have one for you, Jack. Supply chain financing.
What did you learn there?
You know, banks have been trying to sell supply chain financing for so many years.
Yes.
And it's hard from a treasury perspective to see a real benefit from it, depending what industry you're in, right? And I asked a couple of questions during the conference regarding supply chain financing. And the interesting thing is, one was, is supply chain financing more useful in certain industries than others, was one of the questions. The other question was, what are the regulatory aspects that you need to consider if you get into supply chain financing, especially if you want to use your own funding? And in both cases, I get very vague to no real answers. The other piece I find interesting is that if supply chain financing is a very useful tool, there seems to be no suppliers out there that are providing a solution directly to corporates. Because in the past, you know, the banks have said, this is really great for you, this is something you need to do. And when you looked at it, you say, okay, the benefit is for the bank and the supplier, but there's no benefit for me, it's just administration. And there's a potential benefit to get a better yield if you could use your own excess cash, but there are no real systems out there. A couple of banks have come up and say, yeah, you can do that.
Yeah, I think in fact there are systems out there. I heard one from, I think it was Siemens. They have a bank independent systems to handle this.
Prime Revenue is one of the suppliers.
Which one is it?
Prime Revenue. And there
Okay.
are other suppliers on dynamic discounting. So this was an area that you felt wasn't well treated, well discussed.
I think over the last X number of years, nobody has really been able to give me a good view of what it means. And that would be including what industries are applicable, or mainly applicable to supply chain financing. What are the benefits you should be looking at in total? You categorize the benefits depending on where you are on the scale, right? From industry, including if you're cash rich or cash short, etc. And after that, saying, what are the solutions you should be looking at? How should you partner about this? One thing regarding partnering, it could be right to partner with a bank if you think about, I want to partially use my own cash, but if I use my own cash for M&A or whatever, I might run out of that excess cash, so I need somebody else to step into that process, because you also don't want it to be disjointed. Right?
So just moving on a bit, the other big two thoughts were, one was talks about centralization and outsourcing, which may be part of the same coin. Did you learn anything in those areas? Palle?
Not really, I think.
Okay,
Yeah, it surprised me that we're still talking about the basic concept. The piece that surprised me, and it surprised me from a prior discussion we had too, Jack, is that outsourcing seems to be creeping up back on the radar screen again. I mean, as you know, we are doing outsourcing on the treasury side. We're using Bank of America in Dublin as our outsourcing partner. And we are probably one of the few larger companies that are in that arena today, where, from an overall standpoint, it's efficient, etc. But very few other corporates have followed suit, so to speak. So I do think...
Have you followed suit?
Not in Treasury, but yes, we have outsourced on the financial accounting part. And you could argue we're doing a lot of outsourcing when it comes to the components we use and produce. So outsourcing is part of our business model as such, but we haven't really done it in Treasury yet. And whether it would be something we could do might be, but it would require that we find something that fits into the way we're doing things. And having said that, you could argue that we are doing some sort of outsourcing. The EMEA reporting, we ask our banks to do that, so that's kind of outsourcing, but it's really small parts.
And I think the technology piece should enable exactly what you said, more outsourcing, like the trading portals, etc. That's a part of outsourcing as well. Yeah. And I think it's a trade-off between, how much functionality you want to control in-house versus really outsource, because some of the functionality you have from a treasury management system might go away slightly when you do the outsourcing, depending on what the structure is.
Okay, thank you. We're running out of time, but what's your final thought, your single thought? Palle, do you want to start us off in terms of your single take from Eurofinance Budapest?
Yeah, my first thought when I have to reflect is that there's really not a lot of news going on from year to year. So if you want to learn something by joining a conference like Eurofinance, you don't need to go every year.
Okay, and Bengt?
I would agree with the first comment made there, and I think the fact that the technology is moving so slowly when it comes into full integration and really enablement of use of technology, if you're looking at if it's Swift or if it's looking at ERP system and integration across the board, it's much slower than I would like it. You look at EBAM as well, right? All of these things, they get thrown up on the radar screen and everybody speaks about them saying you need to do this now. And 5 years later, 10 years later, they're still just creeping forward. So it seems to be a lack of investment to make that synergy and integration possible.